Have you ever taken the time to notice the intricate buildings of our past? The ones that have literally the most beauty you've ever seen. They're so grand, have this perfect symmetry as well as the most beautiful geometry ever.
The ones that are constructed of solid stone, hand-carved details, they have statues, depictions, and sometimes a little copper thing at the top.
So many details beyond your imagination and obviously nothing like what we see today. The buildings today are so mundane and cookie cutter, similar to each other, grayed out, whereas they used to be so grand and so intricate and they had real beauty to them.
Yeah, like now we have like a shoebox that just goes up like a skyscraper. There's no attention to detail. There's no uniqueness about that besides it just being long and tall.
But we basically love these really old buildings and find them so cool. So we have gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole and we're going to be sharing that with you guys today.
We were just going back and seeing that they don't really seem to fit into what we construct nowadays. So we were just trying to see how they were constructed back in the day.
And also, we don't make them anymore these days. Like the buildings that were made during these multiple different timelines or periods of time, we basically don't make those types of buildings today. We, obviously make skyscrapers and things like that, but nothing really carved of stone or to a grand level or, to something so geometric that is so perfect and symmetrical. Yeah. Like, it's honestly just sad that things don't have beauty anymore. Like something as simple as a building, like with something way more than it is today because of how that they made it. So it's really weird that we don't make buildings like this anymore and that they used to be built like in this way. So let's get a little bit into why.
For us, this all started in 2023, December. We went to New York for a little Christmas trip. Had the best time of our lives, but while we were there, we stopped by and we saw the cathedral.
St. Patrick's Cathedral.
St. Patrick Cathedral, yes. And I'm not kidding, guys. When we were crossing the road to get to the cathedral, I was almost shaking.
Seeing it from the street, like with how tall that it is, and also in the comparison to the skyscrapers in normal city life, right? Yeah. Like seeing it was beyond amazing. Like I couldn't even comprehend the visuality of it's almost incomprehensible, if that makes sense.
It was like piercing my eye with just perfection.
I've never seen something with so many intricacies and to such a level of height and grandness. And then this side is exactly symmetrical to this side, and it's all stone, and it's beyond amazing.
Don't even get us started on the inside. The inside was the entire ceiling was hand-carved depictions. The side walls were also depictions and just detail.
I was completely awestruck in there. Like it felt like I was not in a building. I completely was not understanding how humans built this. It's so crazy that something so big and so grand and something so beautiful is able to even be accomplished. Yeah. As we saw that first building and we're so blown away with it, and we kind of a little bit researched into buildings and stuff like that, and we found a lot of interesting stuff, so let's get into that.
First thing we looked into was who made these buildings, and then secondly, when were they made?
And how are they made? I feel like a lot of questions got brought up because I was just completely amazed, to be honest. I wanted to know who did this, when they did this, how they did it, how long did it take, some things like that, because just thinking about, architecture today, people make obviously skyscrapers and things like that, but we don't see anything really intricate being built like they potentially were in the past.
Yes, and the process for nowadays is you have to do a lot of stuff with permits and stuff, but there is a lot of documentation of the buildings being made.
Construction
Every
photos,
single one, even a small little shack.
Right, like blueprints and construction photos and things of that. So the first thing that we basically came across was the timeline of when these were made, right? Yeah. So most of the buildings that are, at least in America, were built around the 1800s, beginning, late, basically throughout the whole 1800s. And so let's think about what exactly did the 1800s look like, right? So just no electricity, right? No electricity, just, light by fire. No tools.
No roads.
No roads.
Horse and buggy,
exactly. Hammers and chisels. Power tools were built in 1895, and then electricity or light bulbs were built around the 1870s. So all these buildings that were built before then seems like they would have been such a hassle to do. So according to research, basically all of these buildings were, built during this time where we didn't have power and we didn't have power tools and stuff like that. But another big thing that was intriguing and interesting was the fact that the population of certain cities and areas were very, very small, especially compared to what we have today.
Exactly. Just in the USA, we had 5 million people.
In the, I think, 1800s?
Early 1800s. And that's more than we have in one state now. So just to put that in comparison.
Also with the timeline, there's pretty much diseases running rampant. There's yellow fever, tuberculosis, things of that nature that are, basically wiping people out. And, plus the small amount of people on top of that, it seems like hard to be able to build huge buildings.
Just for the time too, since there was more sickness and stuff, kids were dying earlier. And then also the life expectancy was 35 to 40, sometimes 60, but mainly 35 to 40. But with all that, population, sickness, and the lack of tools and stuff, resources, yes. The buildings that they were building in the early 1800s, just for example, Abraham Lincoln was born in a shack. This is the exact picture of where he was born, and that's just a little reference of what they were building and what they were doing in the early 1800s.
Also, with these buildings being mostly stone, as you can see visually, like it seems very, very hard to be able to import that stone or to bring it from somewhere whenever,
Yes.
once again, there's no trains. The train was invented in 18 something and there's no cars. We only have horse and buggies once again. So I don't know how we're carrying huge ass pieces of marble and
just the magnitude
stone.
of being the stone first, and then also being able to properly cut that and like sculpture it in a way.
And of course, there's artisans and stuff that I'm sure specialize in certain crafts of the time, especially. But to the level of how many buildings there are and to the grandness of those buildings, of what they are, it seems very almost like things aren't really adding up. So
Exactly.
I don't know if y'all are getting where we're going with this, but I am just a little confused as to how we built these buildings whenever we didn't have power tools, which we have today, when we didn't have electricity, which we have today, and a lot less people, a
Way
lot
less
more
people.
issues in your way.
New York, for example, had 60K people in the early 1800s. That's a big, one of the first cities that we had here in the USA.
A port city, right?
They had the most types of people, like more craftsmanship, salesmen, and obviously 90% of the people were rural living. So just to put in comparison, how many people would be able to actually build a building, or how many people are craftsmen, or how many people are metalsmith? It's just like, where are the workers that were actually intended to build a building?
And if they were training people in mass, like to be able to learn how to do these buildings, then there's probably going to be a school or like some type of evidence for this.
Or
And
a book.
most of us have never heard of anything of our families or even anyone really building these buildings, so it's seeming a little sketch.
Yeah.
Also, as we were looking into these buildings, we found out that there's practically no construction photos of any of these buildings that were built in the 1800s,
They
as
only
well
have-
as no blueprints.
They
So-
only have the one person standing beside the building and then the building in the back. There's no records, there's no
As a matter of fact,
transportation
most
records.
photos look something kind of like this, where the building almost looks like it's under mud or dirt, and it kind of seems as if they're digging it up. So
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that, but those are just photographs from history of people at a certain time, and it just makes you question why exactly is that photo like that.
Also, while we're on a thinking thought, you know that for to build a building, you need a foundation. Why would the foundation be almost underground? Like, it's obviously in the ground, but why would it be covered from the outside with, so to say, mud or a lot of dirt?
One of the biggest things that honestly shocked me was the fact that almost all of these buildings have a timeline of being built within 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
give or take. Sometimes they're a little more, sometimes they're a little less, but the fact that a building to that scale and grandness can be built in 2 to 3 years with no power tools, no horse and
Yeah.
buggy, or only horse and buggy, once again, like we said, like it's very creepy and weird. I don't know, it makes no sense to me. I don't get that. And just for reference, today, like a skyscraper or even just a regular building takes definitely 2 to 3 years, probably a lot more.
No, I think it's like 7 to 10 years, if not more, to build a skyscraper that
Even though we do have electricity now and we do have power tools now and we have a lot more people as
a
well.
lot more people. To render it down a little bit, we're in the early 1800s. We just have a train in 1804. The population is probably 30 to 40, max 60K people. We have diseases spreading around like crazy, and then the life expectancy is 35 to 40, with children dying very, very early on in their life. With that, how would you sort of say that?
They were able to make thousands, hundreds of buildings that even just one of them we almost pretty much can't do today. And you might think that this was only big cities, you might think that this is only different parts of the country, but all over the United States and practically every city, even town, were these intricate buildings built. We called them post offices, we called them insane asylums, we called them orphan houses. There was a million different names put for them, but literally in very, very small towns all over the United States, these buildings were. A lot of them have been destroyed. A lot of them have only parts remaining, but this was a huge, huge thing that was pretty much worldwide. Also, as we were just talking, like there was a lot of them were basically put to be called insane asylums, and I would say that there was dozens of them throughout the United States.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
just if that is the case, that we made these huge, huge, huge buildings that are for insane asylums, I'm curious as to why we made so many whenever the population was very low. Like, was the entire population of people crazy? Were a huge portion of them needed to be put in these things? It's very questionable
sketchy.
because
Yeah.
these buildings are huge, like thousands or hundreds of rooms, and there's hundreds of them throughout the United States, was or were, and that just is very much questionable.
Yeah.
According to the narrative of what we've been taught, right, a lot of these things that were coming up in society were past this period. It was in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
That's when, sports started to be invented, like baseball or soccer or, all these things, or the stock market, all these things that, never were, that supposedly just came up, or electricity or television, or, the list goes on.
Yeah, I do find it pretty weird that the entirety of new inventions and buildings that we have never built before just started right after the stock market in 1792. Like everything after that point, we got the train, we got electricity, we got sports. It's like we just started to actually have a brain after centuries of thousands of years where we were just building nothing and having no buildings and teepees and no way of transportation at all, or no
Right,
fun.
just basically, obviously we all went to school pretty much, at least here in the United States, and what we got taught was that during the 1800s, that was, a harsh time, and they were just like pulling their wagons and trying to build up this city because the United States is this new land, right? If there's this new land here in the United States, then there would be no buildings here, and that's pretty much it.
In our history books, they literally call it the Dark Ages. Like it was people were dying. There was like no plumbing. There's just so many diseases, low population, and also if you're not familiar with the area, you're going to be like not sure where to go or how to expand or how to farm. It's just like there's too many things that are piled up on top that are just brushed off like if nothing. So the part where this gets a little bit deeper and like a little bit scary to me is we were, doing research in these big cities of, population was big, so inventions were big, and also people doing things were big. But I grew up in a small city, so did Jackson for half of his life. We figured out that there's these big buildings fully out of stone in those small new cities that we lived in.
In most of the cities that, like, I'm sure if you live in a small town, it's pretty empty and bare, right? It seems like only a limited amount of people have lived there, and they haven't done much to the surrounding areas. So thinking that and seeing that, you would never expect there to have at some point been huge intricate buildings like for a post office or for whatever the case is, right? But almost every city in the United States has that. Like the town that I grew up in, I ended up actually finding this postcard that had a picture of an intricate building that I've never seen in my life because it's been torn down. So I would highly recommend you guys to either look at your surroundings in your cities or towns and to see if you can see any of these buildings, or if not, look at postcards because they probably have been destroyed, sadly. And whenever you start looking into the stories of, like, for example, who built certain buildings, right? Like, let's say that we like this really good building in this certain city and we diving into like who built that and stuff. So whenever you look into these stories, they a lot of times seem kind of made up a little bit. Like it has super similar names. Like I've seen several stories where the names were like kind of the exact same name of the builder and the dates were super similar. The stories were super similar. They say that a lot of times it was built earlier and then broken and then built again.
Even deeper to the deeper hole, a lot of these buildings were not burnt to the ground. They allegedly burnt down to the ground.
Right. So like I would say most of the major cities, I know for sure New Orleans, I can't remember exactly which other ones, but there was a lot of others that had the Great Fire of New Orleans or whatever city.
And there was multiple here in New Orleans.
Yes,
there was
and
some
multiple buildings, pretty much the whole city that pretty much got destroyed, right? And I don't know about you, but I've never heard about bricks and stone being able to be lit on fire.
Isn't a stone brick what they build a fire pit out of?
Yeah.
And that does not burn down. That physically can't burn down because it's made to burn. It's made to not burn down. It's made to hold fire.
And that's just one story of how most of these buildings have gotten destroyed, because there's lots of other stories. Like during the World Wars, a lot of the buildings were destroyed in certain cities. I'm sure people just did it by choice and want and desire for whatever reason that might be, but all these buildings have been taken away from us and we've been replaced with gray scale things in boxes that are pretty much the exact same thing over and over again, as opposed to being something with beauty and dimension and, you know, different things.
Long lasting.
Exactly.
It's meant to be historical. Like,
because I mean, if these buildings have lasted however long they've lasted, right? They're outstanding and they outlast almost everything.
Yeah.
So for them to be destroyed is like fucked up.
Yeah, very, 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 very messed up.
So with all that information, what exactly does that mean for these buildings or for us?
It seems like we are almost being told a story. It's weird how history and his story is like very, very similar sounding. It just, to me, it's not adding up. I finished high school, Jackson finished college. I can't see where someone that has no experience or knowledge of doing things like this can just pop out these buildings every single year and it takes them 2 to 3 years to make a building. And I also can't comprehend the same backstory that why we no longer have them. We have either part of the building or we have the building that just completely got wiped away.
And why were so many destroyed, right? Like, why are we being told all these different stories about all these things that go together?
And there's so many more things that are layered on top of this, like the World's Fairs. Those were huge arrangements of buildings that were temporarily built, and then just fully wiped out because it was just temporarily. There's also electrical poles that were attached to these buildings that did something, some type of like electrical
Right,
property.
it's like they built everything with purpose and intention. I'm not sure that they would just throw that on there for decor, like
Yeah.
a stick.
A stick with out of copper, it doesn't make any sense.
But with all this, like, what do you think that means for what these buildings are, right? Like, if you think about the actuality and do think through your own processing, like how the timeline was, right? So we don't have hammer and chisel. We've already established all that. If we believe all that, I'm not sure how we're thinking that this building was able to be built, especially on the scale that it was for one building times like 1,000, right? It's not only in the United States, but that's the biggest part even too, because, the United States was founded in 1776. Supposedly there's no buildings there or anything, but seeming like there was.
Yeah, it's not just centered around the USA now because the USA is just the newest country, and it's very, very weird that we have these buildings. It doesn't make any sense.
It seems to point to the fact that there could have possibly been some type of technology that we're not aware of, or just basically something that we don't know. I feel like the story is completely being blanked out for us, and we're trying to fill in the blanks ourselves because we didn't get taught this stuff. I went through school, I went through college, he went through school, high school, we've all went through school, and I know for sure that this is things that we're not taught of.
No.
Like, why was the White House? There's a photo of the White House that looks a little bit under the mud, and then there's like a horse and buggy by it. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
We're not telling you how to think. We're just telling you
To think.
To think. But
My lunch break, that is the ultimate person to watch.
big person
So
to watch.
go watch
My
him.
lunch break. He just has multiple videos.
But do this research for yourself. It's honestly really interesting and crazy to see something that is so crazy and beyond your imagination in real life and really close to you. Like, you would be so surprised to understand how close these things are or used to be to you.
With that, we are going to leave you to sit on that and just ponder it. And we hope
Think
you
about it a
enjoyed.
little bit, do some research if you feel like you should, but this is something very interesting and crazy and feels like we're being lied to in a lot of ways. So, and if you think about this all potentially having some truth to it, right? There's always going to be an intent for why we would be having all these things left out for us, right? Like why we're taught this as opposed to this, and things are just not adding up.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that.
Just like playing cards. If someone's hiding their cards, it's probably for a reason. Why
Right.
Someone's hiding cards from us. We hope you enjoyed and you learned something, or you want to learn something.
Yes, go look at beautiful stuff, cool shit, and enjoy your life because it's what we doing.
Peace.